Thank you, Prime Minister, for those very kind and interesting words. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm most pleased to introduce our first keynote speaker. Giuliano Amato is a legend in Italian and European politics. He has served twice as Prime Minister of Italy. He has been for 18 years member of the Italian Parliament. And also he was the Vice President of the Convention of Europe for Future in the early 2000s. But Giuliano Amato has also very strong and important academic background. He was for many years Professor of Comparative Constitutional Law at the University of Rome and many other important major universities. He's also currently Professor Emeritus of the European University Institute in Florence, and author of almost more than 30 books on various topics, including constitutional law and European integration. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Giuliano Amato.
Pleasure to meet you. Very nice of you. Well, good afternoon. Excellent for the Estonian presidency to give us the opportunity to discuss the past and the present and the future of our union. And my starting point will be exactly the same that Prime Minister Ratas was dealing with, the relationship between national identities and the union. National identities have never been antagonist to, in principle, to our political integration. Also, the founding fathers of the community at the time, also Altiero Spinelli and the other authors of the Ventotene Manifesto, were not against national states. They were against the exclusivity of national sovereignties that had led to conflicts without other solution but weapons and wars. In other words, they wanted no more wars among us. And this sort of missionary purpose did not imply the disappearance of our nation states. It implied the willingness by them to put some of their functions together and to create a superior entity which was not supposed to supersede the states, nor to eliminate our diversities, our cultures, our languages, our constitutional settings, our national constitutional settings. Our motto was due, not everybody is aware of it, was due to a students' competition of the European Parliament in the year 2000. And it was a group of students winning that competition that gave us the motto, united in our diversities. My God, this is exactly what we were and are supposed to be. United in our diversities, not united because we eliminate our diversities. It wouldn't be Europe anymore. We would somehow waive our qualities, the value added precisely of our diversities. Joseph Weiler, a great American European citizen, because he is also an Italian citizen now, our former president, Brigitte, wrote at the beginning of our experience that the Grundnorm of the European Union was the principle of mutual tolerance. And this is the sense of the Union. due to our diversities, we had been fighting against each other. Wars had prevailed among us. The sense of the union was not to eliminate our diversities, but to learn, each of us, how to appreciate our diversities, how to draw the common principles that necessarily our long history has nurtured in our different countries. And here, actually, you have the two pillars of our institutional construction. On the one side, the common constitutional traditions of the member states, which are the great reservoir of European rights. Most of the rights that we have as European citizens are not to be found in the treaties, quite obviously, but as the European Court of Justice has decided, in our national constitutional systems, whenever you draw out of them common constitutional traditions, and common constitutional traditions do exist. And this is where from also the Charter of the European Fundamental Rights of the year 2000 was somehow drawn. The initial construction was a very clever one because it gave superiority, but not supremacy, to the European level. Consider these two elements. On the one side, the Commission, which has the European interest as its mission, its basic interest. Due to this, the Commission has the monopoly of the legislative proposal in the initial community system, but it has remained. The Council of Ministers decides eventually, and therefore adapts to the national interests that are represented by the members of the Council, the initial proposal, which is supposed to be based on the European interest only. But in order to amend the proposal of the Commission, the states have to agree with each other. Unanimity is needed to approve an amendment against the initial proposal. So it's a very delicate balance. This superiority of the European interest does not exclude national interests, but require national interests to find a common ground to adapt the proposal of the Commission. So this is another essential element. And in time, we also adopt the principle, don't forget, of mutual recognition. The principle of mutual recognition implies that there are diversities among us, also in legal rules. But it also implies that there is a common texture, a common platform, and as long as this common platform is complied with, differentiations can be accepted and can be part of the European legal order. Of course, this delicate balance did not exclude that the process of closer integration could somehow take place. And it took place, and we reached the point which goes beyond the standards of any international organization of having a parliament directly elected by the citizens. which was something that gave our union a sort of dual identity, both international and constitutional. Still within the initial balance, however, and despite the parliament directly elected, despite the fact, very important, that further pieces of legislation went to co-decision with the parliament, which meant went to the majority voting. And majority voting makes an important difference in terms of strengthening the links, the mutual links of the members. As long as I want on something unanimity, I don't really feel at home in the community where we vote, because I'm wary of the decision of the others without my vote. I want my vote to be essential. If I accept the majority voting, it means that at least for the areas where the majority voting applies, I feel confident that whatever the decision, my interests one way or another are protected. So my community links in this case are clearly stronger. But the balance was not changing. And if somebody tried to say, now we have a supremacy of the community system vis-à-vis national systems, the answer was no. In the States, they have supremacy. In the European community and then union, we have primacy, which is a different thing. And not only for legal scholars like us. It is a different thing because it implies that the primacy of community law and of community decision is recognized and accepted only in the areas where the competence to decide has been transferred to the superior level. And the court said since the beginning, quite rightly, it would be pointless for you states to transfer a competence to a superior level and then to keep exercising that competence at the national level, creating different legislations in different member states. It would be a stupid mess. Making it pointless for you what you have decided. So the effect utile of the transfer. But this is primacy. There is no primacy beyond the powers that are conferred. At the turn of the century, it seemed that times could be ripe for going further. And the protagonist of the European scene became the Constitution. I played that round. I must say that I'd never been convinced that a constitution could come out of that convention. Now, also because it was a constitutional treaty. So it was very ambiguous since the beginning. It was both. It was supposed to be a constitution and supposed to be a treaty. So there was an ambivalent kind of. Second, because at the end of our works, the basic ingredients of a constitution were still missing, because primacy was still primacy, had not become supremacy. Please compare the supremacy clause of the US Constitution and the clause on primacy of our treaty. There is an enormous difference. I just underline one. In the supremacy clause, you read that the Constitution and the laws approved pursuant to it will prevail, whatever in the constitutions and laws of the member states to the contrary. Now, on the basis of Article 4 of our treaty, the article that protects national identity and its consequent features, should a European act, although adopted within a competence of the European Union, violate fundamental features of one of the member states, the Bundesverfassungsgericht, the Italian Constitutional Court, the Polish Constitutional Court, and others have already said that at that point counter limits would be raised. Right, wrong, it's not for me to say it now. I say that this is our situation at the moment, and actually I defined this situation already at the end of the works of the Convention in terms of this is not a female, as some of us were hoping. You know that Constitution in some of our languages is a she, and treaty is a he. Not all the languages are neutral here. Italians and French have the fantasy of using also male and female in these matters. So, Constitution is beautiful and is female. Treaty, sort of ugly creature, is a male. And I hoped it to be a female. I had to admit at the conclusion it is a hermaphrodite. And I said in a conference in Cambridge a couple of years later on, which is published in the Cambridge Law Yearbook, that we should learn how to make the life of a hermaphrodite happy. Because also hermaphrodites have a right to be happy. And therefore improving the functionality, the efficiency of the hermaphrodite without expecting it to become necessarily a beautiful young girl. Also because the Bundesverfassungsgericht is right when they decided in the Lisbon Treaty Urteil that we are free to go federal. But if we want to go federal, we have to change our national constitutions, because our national constitutions don't go beyond a union of states in the authorization they give us to work for European integration. And here I have to rush toward my conclusion. How many minutes do I have? 4 or 5. Your hand was uncertain. I take it as a 5. No, also because, no, I don't remember, okay. No, because there is still room in a union of states for integrating areas of our activity. Be careful. And what has been happening in the latest years is a sort of pendulum swinging dangerously toward the opposite side, opposite to integration. So at the moment, we are too much on the side of the member states for at least a couple of main reasons. One is institutional. After Maastricht, after the room of the intergovernmental method, the European Council has been deciding much more than it was supposed to do, and it has been deciding perceived as the member states in joint session taking the decision. No responsibility of the European Council toward the European Parliament. Necessarily, the reaction is, if I want a more democratic process, I involve my national parliament. And therefore, for European decisions taken by the highest European body, we only have the intervention of national parliaments, of the Bundestag, to authorize the German government to do this and that, and to increase the resources for this or for that, and other parliaments following this example. There is something that doesn't work here, because at least in the area of European decisions, the circuit of political responsibility should be European. But even more than that, the demand of protection by my state in relation to issues that are pan-European, the economy, migration, terrorism. More and more, we see populist movements that want a return to the states. This is dangerously on the side of the states. And I say dangerously because, rationally speaking, we understand that, let's say, let me give you this example that for an Italian is quite important. In the Eurozone area, austerity, should we have austerity? Should we ignore austerity? It's quite a silly discussion. If your debt is too high, you have to readjust your public finances. There is no way out, and it is your responsibility. But the question is, should also your economy be destroyed by the fact that you are involved in financial readjustment? Answers that you receive from other systems are, let us take the states. Okay, Wisconsin has to take care of its own debt, full stop. But there are grants coming from the federal level that keep the economy of that member state alive. Now, this is something that we have always been missing in the Eurozone. My state was engaged in financial readjustment. At the European level, nothing was done. While now, in the last document of the Commission on the future of the Eurozone, you have a stabilization function to be exercised at the European level, pouring resources in the economy of the member states, not to repay their debt, but to keep the economy alive, which means using the two levels of governance for cyclical and anti-cyclical measures at the same time. This is something that we need. This is an integration that we need. This is something that we all understand. We can't run the Eurozone efficiently with some more integration, which is inside the Eurozone. At the same time, in defense and security, necessarily we will need some more integration among those of our member states who have the necessary resources to do it, mostly with America doing what it is doing. So what am I envisaging? I'm envisaging what Vivian Schmidt, an excellent, not legal scholar, this is an advantage of her, not legal scholar, the multi-cluster Europe. So Europe remains a union of states, but in different areas areas, not necessarily the same states, but also different states, engage into processes of further integration aiming at specific functions and missions. Migration, necessarily some of the southern countries should integrate with each other, which not necessarily involves countries that are not directly affected by this phenomenon. Migration, terrorism, anti-terrorism, Eurozone, defense and security. And you have these different areas in which Europe integrates, remaining a union of states. This is, I think, this is what we should offer our citizens now. Those who now say, why don't we convene a constitutional assembly and deciding to elect the European president? Honestly speaking, I'm a friend of many of the potential candidates to this position, but is this really what European citizens now expect from us? Electing a president or having more delivery, having a more efficient Eurozone, having anti-terrorism and immigration really handled and governed? So when they tell you, but there is the democratic deficit, don't mind, is not necessarily on the side of input. I feel I need to elect somebody else, otherwise I'm not happy. No, democratic deficit is also on the side of the output. I need more delivery. I'd like Europe much more. Should Europe succeed in giving me something more? And this is the main problem we have, and I hope this is the problem we will solve. Finished. I don't leave the podium without some water.
You can
sorry for your minutes. It's done. Okay.